Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your first lesson of the week. We are on simple interest. So we are looking at simple interest occurs in two main situations. Potentially if you were to borrow money. So if you were to borrow money off someone, you would then pay that back with interest. And the interest is that extra bit you have to pay back. Same as if you were to put money into a bank, you would give them that money and then they would give you back that plus a bit extra. And that is your interest. Now, in terms of simple interest, we sometimes call this flat rate interest, and that's because regardless of how long the investment occurs, the amount of interest you receive is the same. So, for example, if you had $100 and you invested it at 10% per year, or sorry, we'll say $1,000 at 10% per year, you're getting 10% of the $1,000. So after 1 year, you would have $1,100. And then after the second year, you would have $1,200 because we add in another 100, another 100, another 100, another 100. So therefore, if we were to graph the period by the amount, we get a straight line. Now this is in contrast to compound interest, which we'll talk about later on. So the formula that we use for simple interest is I equal P, where P stands for the principal times the interest, which is a decimal, very important, multiplied by the number of terms. Now, this formula, the I equals PIN, is on your QCAA formula sheet. So you don't need to remember the formula as such, but you need to remember what each of the letters mean. The second thing is with our interest rate and our number of terms, these need to be in the same unit. So if we were looking at, say, 10% interest per month for 1 year, so we'll write that down. So if we had 10% per month for 1 year, these units are different. So we have to have them the same. So the 1 year would be equal to 12 months. So therefore, I is 0.1 or 10% as a decimal, and N would be equal to 12. Most interests we tend to look at tend to be in annual, but we do need to be careful reading the questions. Number one, what is the interest period? By default, unless told otherwise, it's usually per annum. So PA per annum, which is the same as a year. So this I equals PIN, that is for calculating your amount of interest. We do need to then work out what is the final amount. So your final amount is equal to your principal, so how much you start with, plus your interest. That is one formula you do need to know. So let's have a look at an example. So Robin invests $2,000 for 3 years at simple interest of 5% PA. So pulling out our key information, we've got $2,000, 3 years, 5% PA. So let's write down our variables. So P equals 2,000, N is 3 years, and I equals 5%, which is 0.05. So calculate the interest earned over the 3 years. So I equals PIN. So I is 2,000 times 0.05 multiplied by 3. Get my trusty calculator out. So 2,000 multiplied by 0.05 multiplied by 3 gives me $300. So determine the total amount of money in the account at the end of 3 years. So our A value is P plus I, so the capital I is for the total interest. So A equals 2,000 plus 300, so 2,300. Robin decides to reinvest the money for another 18 months at a new simple interest rate of 6% PA. Determine the balance of the account after the additional 18 months. So at this point here, we are starting with the final amount from the previous question. So I'll switch colours, hopefully it comes up. So for part C now, our principal is equal to the 2,300. Our interest rate has changed. Now our interest rate is 6% PA, which is 0.06. And our time period is 18 months. So these are not the same units, so we need to put them into the same units. Easiest is probably to convert 18 months into years. So that's 1.5 years. So now we need to calculate our amount of interest. So I equals PIN. So 2,300 multiplied by 0.06 multiplied by 1.5. Use our trusty calculator. So $207. So A equals P plus I. So 2,300 plus 207. So 414. I have added that incorrectly, my apologies. 2,300 plus 207 is $2,507. Let's look at our next example. Okay, a fixed deposit income producing account has 4.2% PA simple interest paid every fortnight. Determine the amount of money that would be needed to invest to receive $150 each fortnight. So if it is 4.2% PA, given we're working in fortnights, we may need to convert this 4.2% into a fortnightly amount. So let's start with getting this into a decimal. So 4.2% is 0.042, and we need to work out how many fortnights are there in a year. Well, there's 52 weeks in a year. If there's 2 weeks per fortnight, well then there's going to be half that number. So we should have 26 fortnights per year. So what we have to do is take our interest rate and divide that by 26. So we're going to go 0.042 divided by 26. So we're going to divide by 26 fortnights per year. So we get 0.001615, well, approximately. Now, a key thing with your calculator is if you leave that number in your calculator, we can use the answer function later, so we're not actually rounding off. So, we want our interest earned to be $150. We know what I is, and we want that $150 to be in one term, because we want it in one fortnight. So therefore, we can just substitute all of our values in. So we've got I equals PIN. The 150 equals P, which we don't know, multiplied by 0.001615, multiplied by 1. And all we need to do is divide by our 0.0016. So on this side here, what I'm going to do is, on my calculator, I'm going to type 150 divided by, and then I'm just going to go answer. So for my calculator, I've got the Sharp EL. I just go alpha answer, because the answer is in green. Your calculator, you're going to have to check with your calculator what the actual function is. That way I don't actually round off any of this number and go equals. And I end up with $92,857. Which sounds about right. We can check that. So if we say that initial amount multiplied by our original interest rate, which is 0.042, so it would be $3,900 per year. Divide that by 26, I get to $150 per fortnight. So we have answered correctly. Our next question. Determine the rate of simple interest that would result in an initial investment of $8,000 growing to $9,480 in 5 years. So we have an initial investment, an interest rate, and a principal, and a number of years. So we know that our final value equals, this is A, 9,400 is our final amount. I don't know why I wrote T, which is A. Initial amount is P, and number of turns is N. So A equals P plus I. We know that A equals 940. We know that P equals 9,400. I'm doing great today. A is 9,480. P is 8,000. N equals 5. So 9,480 equals 8,000 plus I. We can isolate our I on its own, so subtract 8,000 from both sides. So we end up at 1480 is our interest rate. So now we can take from our interest rate and determine what our interest amount is and determine what that interest rate is. So remember, our interest equals principal times interest times the number of terms. We know what I is now, it's 1480. We know our principal was $8,000. We don't know what our interest rate is, but we know our number of terms was 5 years. So we want to divide by 8,000 and divide by 5. And that will give us our interest as a decimal. Grab our trusty calculator. So 1480 divided by 8. So 1480 divided by 8,000 divided by 5, and I get 0.037. So that's as a decimal at the moment. Interests are normally expressed as a percentage. So move our decimal place 2 places, 3.7% per annum, because everything that we've been doing is in years, so we know we're in per annum. Let's move on. So this is our last example for today. So determine the time taken. So we're determining the time. So we're determining N for an investment of $960. So now principal is $960 to grow to $1,320. $1,300.20. And we know our interest is 5.25%, 0.0525, and we're going to assume per annum here, or it could be for whatever unit of time. So we need to solve what n is. So we know that I equals PIN. For this equation, we have P, we have little I, we don't have N, and we don't have capital I. So we're going to have to solve for one of those first. If we have our other formula, A equals P plus I, well, we have A and we have P, so we could solve our I that we need for over here. So 1300.2 equals our principal, which is 960 plus I. We'll subtract our 960 from both sides. Grab my trusty calculator. 1300.2 minus 960 gives us 340.2. Is our capital I, so our total interest, and now we can bring it in and substitute over here. So 340.2 equals our principal, 960, multiplied by our interest, 0.0525, by our number of terms. Divide by our 960, and divide by our 5.25%. So in our calculator, 340 divided by 960 divided by 0.0525 gives me 6.75 equals N. So it's going to take 6.75 terms, and so often, because that is a part of a term, we would round up and say, well, that will take 7 terms. Unless we could actually pull it out earlier, then you could specify it into a less time. So if it was in years, potentially we could be 6.75 years. So that would be 6 years and 8 months. And that is today's lesson. I look forward to seeing you all in our Zoom.